All right, well, we're going to talk about trade discrimination, which of course sounds like a bad thing, and it usually is. Trade discrimination is actually illegal if you're a member of the World Trade Organization, because remember, they have that principle, the principle of most favored nation, which means that you should treat all your trading partners as well as you treat your most favored trading partner. And if you join a customs union like NAFTA or the EU or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, then essentially what you're agreeing to do is treat some of your trading partners better than others. And it does turn out that the World Trade Organization, in the interest of fostering some increase in trade, allows for an exemption to the most favored nation principle for customs unions like NAFTA and the EU. But then the question is, well, trade discrimination, is that a good thing? Surely if we think that free trade is better and we don't feel like we can manage to arrange for free trade with all countries in the world, surely it's better to move tentatively in the direction of free trade with all countries by arranging to have free trade with our immediate neighbors. And if you also remember back to the video on the market failure video that was the last video, you know that there's such a thing as the world of the second best. And so you already are going to say, well, not so fast. Just because free trade is good does not mean a partial move to free trade is better than simply retaining barriers to trade against all other countries. And so that's what's going on in this video. I know there's a lot of lines going on, but it's reasonably simple. If you wanted to go back to the free trade world, here's PW, which is the world price. If there were no trade barriers at all, then all countries would trade at the world price. This is actually the same country with two potential partners, and the thing to notice is the insider in the left diagram. The insider's export supply is quite a long way above the outsider. So in this case, you've joined a customs union where the insider is much less efficient than the outsider, and then in contrast, how about joining a customs union where the insider is rather similarly efficient to the outsider, just slightly worse? Well, if you had completely free trade with all countries, then all countries would buy from this country would buy from the outsider. So this is the free trade outcome. There's no customs unions on, there's no barriers to trade on anyone. In a more realistic world, perhaps we have a non-discriminatory common tariff. So T again is the size of the tariff. We have a non-discriminatory tariff on all countries. And so if we don't discriminate, then we add the tariff to the outsider's price, and then we add it to the insider's price. But because the insider is in both cases has the higher marginal cost of supplying the good, PW, the outsider price, is the one that prevails. So we have PW plus T. So this is the point where we have a common external tariff. We've added the tariff to the insider and the outsider. The outsider prevails, and we buy and sell. We buy the good for PW plus T, and this is the amount of imports. So this is no discrimination point. Okay, so then in this diagram that would also be true, and we would be selecting this point here. So this is the non-discrimination level of production and imports. Okay, so now let's imagine that this country joins a customs union, and in case one, they join a customs union where there happens to be a member country that's all, does make the good but isn't super efficient. They have a price that is a long way outside of the outsider's price, but nevertheless, when you remove the tariff on the insider and retain the tariff on the outsider, this is the discriminating point, you can see that it is true that more of the good is imported into the country. So that's a good thing. As a result of joining the customs union, trade does expand. And then if we go to the example 2, where you have the very efficient insider, as a result of taking the tariff off the insider but leaving it on the outsider, the insider's export supply curve prevails, and you have a discriminating country that is giving better terms to the insider, has a very large increase in the amount of trade, in the amount of imports. So you can see right there, this is probably ideal. Join customs unions where people are good at things. That's I guess goes without saying. But then let's look at the welfare implications of this, and you can see that we can generate the implication: is a customs union good or bad? The answer, sort of frustratingly, is it just depends. It depends on who the other members are, how big the tariffs are that you removed, etc. So let's think about the case where we weren't discriminating. So we had a tariff that caused the good to come from the outsider, and then we had that means the government would have been able to collect some revenue, and so this area here is government revenue, and I'll actually shade it in the opposite direction here, because it actually ends up being two different things. So the first thing that happens is you lose government revenue. Do you care? Well, if you have the $1 one vote metric, this portion of government revenue that is lost by taking the tariff off the outsider is redistributed to the domestic consumers, because that's obviously for the consumers, the price falls from PW plus T to this insider price with free of tariff, and so they expand their production they expand the imports, and the import country gets extra surplus. This is import country surplus. So the government loses, but the consumers gain, so we don't really care about that. And then this little area here, you probably get used to the triangles being important, but this is the additional well-being caused by the expansion of imports, and it's called the trade creation effect. So this, as a result of the removal of the tariff on the insider, we move from this point to that point in terms of consumption. This is overall welfare gain. This gain to the consumers in the country is simply redistributed from the government of the country, because they lose the tariff revenue, to the consumers. But then this section here is referred to as the trade diversion effect, and it's the loss of government revenue that is not simply redistributed to the consumers in the country, and it's caused, in the other way to conceptualize this, of course, too, is it's actually the size of the cost differential between the insider, the high-priced insider, and the lower-priced outsider, and the insider can only compete at these high costs if you have a discrimination in terms of tariffs, so that only the insider gets to trade free of tariffs with this country. So what we do in terms of figuring out, well, was this beneficial, is in this case it certainly does look quite beneficial, because you've got the well, no, actually not beneficial in this case, sorry, but this lower portion here is larger than that triangle, so we would say the trade diversion effect is bigger than the trade creation effect. And the problem for us, of course, was joining a customs union with very sort of high costs of production insiders, so you switch trade in a way that becomes not necessarily helpful. And then the other, if you look at the other diagram, and you can see immediately why this is so helpful. It is true again that the government revenue enjoyed when we had a free of discrimination, no customs union, was very, obviously very attractive. But when the customs union entails the removal of the tariff on the insider is very efficient, and that causes a large expansion in imports into this country. So this is the net gain to the import country, because of course the producers in the import country, these are world diagrams, the producers are losing but the consumers are gaining, and this is the overall, this is B plus D if you go back to the domestic diagrams. So this is the trade creation effect in this case. So a lot of trade is created, and so that's a big benefit in this case. So it's all caused by the efficient insider, and then this thing in here you can see is the trade diversion effect, which is much smaller. It's the loss of government revenue that isn't simply redistributed to consumers in society. So in this case, is trade discrimination good? One of the big factors to ask is, well, how much trade is created relative to how much trade is diverted? So trade discrimination was bad in this case because the trade creation effect was smaller than the trade diversion effect, but it was a good thing in this case because we had a big expansion of trade, and this effect was relatively minor. So that's a very simple explanation for the welfare effects of a customs union. If you're talking about countries like the EU, of course, that goes well beyond the economic into political and cultural and other important variables. But just from a crude economics point of view, if you're analyzing this from the point of view of trade, you have to be cautious of saying that all expansions of trade are necessarily good. If you divert a lot of trade, that's not as, it's kind of like when Britain joined the European Union. They used to trade free of tariffs with their former colonies, and so in that case, when they joined the European Union, they went from a situation of trading free of tariffs to actually having to add tariffs. So that's a slightly different case. In this case, we've got a diagram where the country has high tariffs and then it selectively reduces them. But if you're a relatively free trading country and you have low tariffs and then you decide to join a union that has high tariffs, so you have to raise your tariffs, then you're coming at it from a completely different point of view, which is, I think, part of where you get that really strong Euroscepticism that you saw in the British Isles recently. All right, well, that's trade creation and trade discrimination.